Maybe? Yes.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Alicia Funderburk, and I am the Vice President of the Osceola Young Democrats. Today, I am joined by my co-host.
I am Lee Wright. I am the Secretary of OYD.
All right, and we are here interviewing today Deborah Barra. So to start with, since this is spill the tea, I'm actually drinking coffee, but I'm drinking coffee. What are you drinking today, Deborah?
I also am drinking coffee. It is French vanilla from Dunkin' Donuts in my Boston Brewing cup that I've had for probably 20 years.
Nice.
Awesome. I'm keeping it plain here with my unsweet iced tea over here.
So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So first, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What's your story?
Sure. So I graduated Dr. Phillips High School, which is in Orange County. I was somewhat of an athlete. I have two older brothers who will dispute the fact that I'm the athlete in the family. So I'm just going to lay it all out there that they're wrong. I am the athlete. I'm a state champion of basketball for Dr. Phillips in 1992. Pains me to say that year. I had a school record for most three-pointers in a season, which lasted about a year, and then my claim to fame was gone. But after I graduated Dr. Phillips, I went to Flagler College in St. Augustine, Florida, and I loved it there. It was like 6 minutes to the beach. If you made the light, it was wonderful. I became president of the student body when I was at Flagler. Ultimately, I then went to law school at University of Florida. Go Gators. And when I was in law school, I interned at a place called the State Attorney's Office. And I got to do my first trial in front of a real jury as an intern. And it was the best experience of my life. I loved it. And when I graduated law school, I applied to work at the State Attorney's Office and I got hired. And I've never left. So I've been here for 17 years prosecuting cases. I love, this is gonna sound weird and it's gonna sound a little creepy, but I love prosecuting sex crimes. That's like my favorite type of case to prosecute. I have personally convicted 43 child molesters and rapists at trial. I got the first life sentence for human trafficking in the state of Florida. And that's really my passion in terms of prosecution. But I've also done a lot of management within the office. I was a manager selected under 3 different elected state attorneys. So obviously this position is an election, and we had 3 people. The past 3 have been very different types of state attorneys. But one of the things that they have in common is me. They made me a manager in each of their administrations, which was an honor to do. And now I am currently as high as you can go in the organization without being elected. So I'm ready to win this election and get to work.
Excellent. That's very fascinating. You can hear the athlete in your voice, by the way.
Well, thank you for saying that. I will remind my brothers.
Excellent. So can you tell us a little bit about what the state attorney does and who all can vote for you?
Yes, so it is Orange and Osceola counties. So it's a large group of individuals. And what we do is it's kind of, we have kind of 3 job responsibilities. 1, we prosecute the guilty. 2, we protect the innocent. And 3, we make sure that everybody's constitutional rights are protected. So essentially, if anybody commits crime in Orange or Osceola County, it feeds into my office. So we have about 19 local municipalities, so 19 police agencies take all their cases to my office. And then we decide what happens to the people. So whether they get a diversion program where they do community service, And then, they write a letter of apology or whatever it is that we want them to do. And then we drop their case so that it's not permanently on their record, to, somebody who commits first-degree murder and we're asking for a life sentence.
Excellent. Thank you for that detail.
Yeah.
So why should voters 40 and under support your campaign?
So this, I think a lot of people don't know much about the state attorney's office. I mean, it's almost like you take a term like that, state, which is boring, attorney, which is super boring, and you add them together and people just immediately want to fall asleep and they just don't care. But it actually is, in my opinion, the most important election that you will ever vote in, because here's why. If you just happen to, say, later on today, go out to your car and it's broken into, ultimately, my office will decide what happens. Of course, the police will come out, they'll do the investigation, but they'll send it to my office for prosecution. If somebody were to, go home and their child says to them, so-and-so touched me, all of a sudden we become the most important entity in your life. We're that entity that nobody really thinks about until it affects you. And when it affects you in the biggest way possible. And on the flip side of that, if somebody accuses you of a crime, somebody says, hey, this person stole whatever, or this person, did whatever, you need to be able to trust that the state attorney's office is going to work out the fact that, no, you didn't, and you're actually innocent, and that you're not going to be wrongfully prosecuted. And so this is all about people. I mean, the entire race is about changing people's lives for good or bad. And we are so linked into so many other issues. I mean, crime affects everyone. It doesn't discriminate. And so you can be a victim of a crime in an instant. Your family member, your loved one could be a victim of a crime in an instant. And you could be accused of a crime in an instant. And we're the entity that's going to make sure that justice takes place. And I don't know of really any other job. And please keep in mind, I've been doing this for 17 years. I love it. And I'm biased. But I think I have the greatest job on the planet, because every day I affect people's lives. And every day, my one job responsibility is to do the right thing. And I don't know of many other jobs where that is your job description. Go in and do the right thing. And so if the right thing is, dropping 20 cases because we haven't proved it or that there's not enough evidence, then that's the right thing. And if the right thing is, prosecuting to the fullest because these people are menaces to society, well, then that's the right thing. And it's really a privilege to do what we do.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So what does justice mean to you, and how is it similar to what justice means to marginalized communities, and what does that look like in practice?
Yeah, so there's one standard of justice, and sometimes that gets, I'll say, confused. Like, I know, and I'll just use a personal example. I break the law, like before the world ended and COVID struck, I was probably breaking the law every Monday through Friday, because there's a Starbucks right across the street from Orange Ave. It's across the street from the courthouse. And I would walk across Orange Ave to, well, it's a Dunkin' Donuts, to get to the Dunkin' Donuts. And I would jaywalk, like, all the time. And it's a courthouse, and so there's cops around, there's deputies, and they'll say good morning to me. I'll say good morning back, jaywalk right in front of them, and go get my coffee. I know that in Black and brown communities, that is an entirely different experience, and it would never happen to me. I am a white woman, and I get that, and I see that in the cases that we receive, in the cases that we review, there is a different standard out there in terms of when people get stopped, what happens when they do get stopped. And I think a lot of times, people, especially in Black and brown communities, it's not just what's happening right now, it's what happened to their parents, to their grandparents. And they've heard all those stories, and now they're getting stopped by police, and it's a different feeling than if I get stopped by police, because I don't, I grew up, oh, the police are good, they don't do anything bad, and that's just kind of like my mentality before I took this job as a prosecutor. And when police make stops, you have people who have all of that background, as well as everything that you see on the news. And it becomes this encounter that is heightened just right out of the gate. And that, when people's emotions are heightened on both sides, the officer doesn't know if this person has a gun. The person who's being stopped doesn't know if this officer is going to treat them with respect. And it's like, then go. And bad things can happen as a result of that. And so I do think that ideally there is one standard of justice, and that is, if you commit crime, you should be held responsible. Now, what that responsibility means, there's a huge window of what it can be. It can mean, like I said before, we drop your case after you do things like community service, or you can be prosecuted and spend time in prison because you are going to hurt people in our community. And that's the way it should be across the board. But I know that sometimes that doesn't always play that way. And my office is the office and the entity that can separate it out and to make sure that everybody is fair and at the same level.
All right, so what does restorative justice mean to you?
Well, that's tricky, because when I deal with criminal law in terms of, crime, punishment, rehabilitation, so on and so forth. So when you're looking at the restoration and more so almost like the rehabilitation part of things pertaining to what we do, obviously for juveniles, the rehabilitation part that's the point of the juvenile justice system. And so that is basically like, okay, you got into trouble, but we're gonna fix that. We're gonna try to put you back on the right track. And then as you go further throughout the criminal justice system, then it becomes less and less about rehabilitation. It becomes more about punishment. Now, in general, in terms of restoration, say specifically of rights and voting rights and making people like whole citizens, I don't understand why the criminal justice system is linked to voting rights. I don't understand, if you have a criminal record, why does that affect how you vote? That doesn't make any sense to me, because you're probably one of those people who need to vote the most because you have been in a system that is run by the government and you're voting for government leaders. So when that's just a huge topic. And so if you want to like ask specifically about an individual aspect of it, but it's kind of, there's a lot to talk about on that.
And I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was going to be one of our questions, was Amendment 4, and like how the state attorney's office should be working with state legislation on enforcing Amendment 4, because I know certain state attorneys' offices have unique perceptions on how they can interact with, I guess, the law or the legislation behind Amendment 4. So can you give us a little bit more information on, if elected, how your office would handle the state's interpretation of Amendment 4?
Yes, so I would definitely be in support of Amendment 4 and letting people vote. As a simple answer, in terms of how to make that happen, the crux of that is determining whether or not, like, when is somebody's sentence over? And obviously it goes into fees and paying back costs and things like that. Now, I will say that if somebody owes restitution to a victim, so let's say somebody stole $100,000 and part of their sentence is, well, you have to pay that money back. I believe that those people should pay that money back. But I also view that as a different issue on whether or not they should be able to vote. And I think a lot of people view it as one and the same, like, well, that's their punishment almost for doing the crime, is that you're not allowed to vote. And that's what I have a problem with. Like, that shouldn't be part of a punishment. And so I don't understand why the two are linked together. So I would definitely be in support of, sure, I want everybody who is sentenced to do and fulfill their sentence. I don't understand why it would exempt them from voting. They still need to do their sentence. Nobody is going to say, okay, you no longer have to pay this back. But I would rather give them the right to vote while they're still paying it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing is, we've been talking a lot about like changes within law, and whether it's Amendment 4 or the way that we're interpreting laws and things like that. And the buzzword that keeps thrown out there, because I'm not a justice person, I'm an educator, and I'm trying to stay abreast of it as best I can, but the term criminal justice reform keeps getting thrown out there.
Sure.
So for you, what is criminal justice reform? What does that look like? And then what steps should the state attorney's office be taking towards enacting criminal justice reform?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, because for me, criminal justice reform equals doing the right thing. And it's policies based on the right thing. Like, for example, bond policy. If you look at it from a criminal justice reform angle, which again, I think is just the normal right thing to do, is poor people should not be in jail because they're poor. People should be in jail because they're serving a sentence because they've committed a crime. And what we see is that a lot of people, let's say you get arrested for a DUI and your bond is set at $1,500. You then need to pay that to get out. Well, somebody who has money can come in, pay that right away. They don't serve another day in jail. We've had cases where, on misdemeanors, people have been sitting in jail for 9 months and that's before their trial. That's, everybody's innocent until proven guilty. And yet here are these people because they don't have the means in order to pay that. So I think that that's completely wrong. I think that monetary bond, and per the statute, it's not the means in which it was intended. That the purpose of bond is to ensure that the community is safe and that the person's going to show up for their court date. That's it. It is not for punishment. So we're essentially punishing less affluent people because they're stuck in jail because of it. So for me, that doesn't make any sense. My bond policy would be on non-violent offenders. No, we're not asking for a cash bond on that. I think also, just kind of switching topics, for under the term criminal justice reform, it involves law enforcement a lot, and how people feel about law enforcement and what steps need to be done. I can tell you, I've been a prosecutor for 17 years. I am probably one of the few people in the entire country that has received a guilty as charged conviction on a police officer who fired into the home of a Black family. And, jurors in Orange County convicted a police officer who was working in the capacity as a police officer when he committed this crime. I personally testified as a witness against the former police chief of Windermere because he committed perjury in one of my cases. It was a sex crimes case, and he was a witness called by the defense, and he committed perjury. And so I then testified against him, and he went to prison. I have dropped cases after I've selected a jury, was about to do, opening statement. And then I got word from the victim where the officer had kind of suggested who the defendant was in a photo lineup. And although I had all of this other evidence, it didn't rise to the level of beyond a reasonable doubt without the photo identification. So although I believe this is the person who committed the armed robbery, I had a detective who tainted a photo lineup. So I walked into the courtroom, I dropped the case, I explained to the judge what was happening. I asked the judge if he would speak to the detective because the detective was there. I mean, I was livid. I was, how dare you screw with a prosecution? Because in my mind, if I convict an innocent person, that is my basic nightmare. And I try to do everything possible to ensure that that doesn't happen. And so how dare the police do something like that? Because now it's my case, and we're not gonna play that way. And so, criminal justice reform is about, essentially justice for everybody. I view it as it's doing what's right. It's doing what's fair. And, a lot of people, when you talk about criminal justice reform, I think they miss probably the most important aspect of it in terms of a state attorney's office. And that is the hiring of assistant state attorneys. To me, that's where it all starts, because you need to hire people who get what it means to be a prosecutor, who get that, my job is to do the right thing. I'm a public servant. This is what I'm doing. I'm not here for convictions. I'm here for justice. And to me, if you have an office filled with people who get it, who understand that, listen, this guy could be doing some bad things, but if the police don't do their investigation the right way, it's going to get thrown out, and we're not going forward, because if they infringe on somebody's rights, it is our job to do the right thing, and we're tossing it out. And I think that is key moving forward, and making true kind of steps towards equal justice for everybody.
So moving forward because you hit on so many different topics, and I appreciate that. Thank you for really diving deep into this. Why do you think it's taking us so long to actually achieve any kind of meaningful criminal justice reform? Why is this something that we're just now waking our eyes to when it comes to cash bail and saying like, oh, this is disproportionately affecting poor communities, and that's why we have these people stuck in jail waiting to bond out? Why is it taking so long?
I think because there's a new generation of people. I don't know what your experiences have been, but sometimes when you get to an organization and it's, well, this is the way we do it, and nobody asks why. I think that has happened in the criminal justice system for a really long time, is that you've had a certain type of person who has become prosecutors, and they have a certain perspective on things, and it's kind of just been transferred from one to another. Your boss is a certain way. They tell you this is how you do it. You tell the next person this is how we do it. And people don't take the time to stop and ask that question. Why do we do this? What is the benefit of this? What is the point of this? And so I think it's great that, and I think that that's another reason why, people under the age of 40 out there in the world paying attention to things, because you're sparking conversations, you're questioning things that haven't been questioned before. And so I think that's kind of been the case with a lot of more of the static things such as bond and those issues. And quite honestly, when it comes to law enforcement, body cameras, game changer, because we as the state attorney's office get to view everything that these people are writing in their reports. So if they say this is what happened in their report, well, previously we would just get that report and we would have a sworn statement from a law enforcement officer saying, hey, this is exactly what happened. And a lot of times we don't have any reason to say, oh no, it didn't, because I mean, obviously we weren't there. We're relying on sworn statements. But now we have the ability to watch it as it happens. And I think things come to light a lot more, and that the people who are not being honest or truthful, we can do something about it now. And I think body cameras is huge.
Thank you. So this is my last question on criminal justice reform, I promise.
Yeah.
But we've kind of talked about the spectrum of criminal justice reform, from the victims to the people committing crimes to how we address criminal justice reform with the law enforcement side of things. And I think we would be remiss as an organization if we didn't bring up this topic, because, I feel like it's the biggest reason why this seat is available. So what is your position on the death penalty? Is that something we should be considering as a society to kind of move away from?
Yes, I am somebody who I have prosecuted a death penalty case. I have sat for the past 3.5 years on the death penalty review board. And I have discussed with, and again, this is a board that covers Orange and Osceola County. So every potential death penalty case I have reviewed with a team of people. And I can tell you that there has never been anything that has been brought out that makes me think that the death penalty should exist, that it has some value. I believe that it is something that not only, and I'm glad you kind of talked about victims as well, because the way I see the death penalty is that it is not a deterrent for people who commit heinous crimes. I mean, nobody before they do something that would warrant the death penalty under these standards says, oh, I better not do this because I might get the death penalty in years to come. I mean, that just doesn't happen. It's just not reasonable. And then on the victim side of things, it does not give victims any closure. And I have been with victims of, we call them homicide survivors. They're the family members of the victims who were killed. And my take on it is that, they will sometimes fight for the death penalty because it's the harshest penalty under the law. And they feel, well, I love this person so much, and the defendant did this heinous act to somebody I love. I want them to get the worst penalty, and it's almost like my job now is to get them the harshest penalty. But I don't think that they realize at the time what that means, and that there is no closure. Every time there is something that gets appealed, we reach out to them and we have to talk to them about the case. It lasts for years, 20, 30 years sometimes, where it's constant reminder of this horrible thing that has happened in their lives. And I believe, and I've never been in their shoes, and I can't imagine what it would be like to have a family member or somebody I loved killed in such a manner. But I also believe that people want to move on and start kind of a new chapter to their life, and the death penalty doesn't allow for that to happen. So on both ends of the spectrum, I don't see it as beneficial. Now, it is the law in the state of Florida, which we know, and it has to be considered for the worst of the worst, because again, it's the harshest penalty available. So there are some people, in the manner in which they commit crime, they separate themselves from others. You know, like, it is just so egregious that it would be dangerous for them to be in general population out of prison, and so on and so forth. So for those people, it would be considered. But for me personally, I would be somebody who would lobby the legislature to end it. And I think that coming from somebody who has done it, I mean, I have participated, I have been a part of it. I think it carries a lot of weight, and I would hope that it carries weight. And I do believe that there were other, elected state attorneys who feel the same way. And so it's about a partnership and making our voices be heard. Because if the prosecutor doesn't believe in this in terms of it having merit, then what are we doing?
Thank you so much. I appreciate your honesty and your candor in answering that question. I feel like it's an incredibly difficult question to answer, and I feel like you navigated it like perfectly. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So to that, we've talked about a lot of different communities, but what specifically can the state attorney's office do to protect those vulnerable communities that are negatively impacted by crime, whether it be low socioeconomic, like poorer neighborhoods, immigrants, and LGBTQ?
Yes. So, and those are really good questions. Talking about the LGBTQ plus community, I was just recently at the Zebra Coalition, and I was talking to them, and I believe, because I've seen it, and also the feedback that I got is that, there's this distrust between a portion of that community and law enforcement, and that needs to change. And I personally have prosecuted a police officer. I've prosecuted 3 police officers in my career, not because I enjoy prosecuting police officers. I don't, but they committed crime, and I truly believe that nobody is above the law. And I don't care what you do for a living. If you commit a crime, you commit a crime. So, but one of the police officers I prosecuted was somebody who was on patrol. He would be in uniform, and he would pick up trans prostitutes, and he would rape them. And it was a terrible, terrible, tragic situation. Getting the victims on board was really difficult, because obviously they don't trust that anything is going to come of it, and that they're in danger. And that's a real thing. And of course, in this scenario, yes, he's a police officer. I mean, he has a gun. He knows where you live, like, of course. And so unfortunately, we did prosecute him. I was able to, I think he was sentenced to about a year in jail. He had to give up his law enforcement certificate, and then he had to do probation, but he didn't get nearly what he should have. I mean, that guy should be in prison to this day for the acts that he was doing. But I wasn't able to do that because I didn't have the cooperation of people coming into the courtroom and saying, this is what happened to me. And that needs to change, because I understand why they feel that way. I get it, but I'm a member. I will be the first openly gay state attorney when I'm elected in the state of Florida. And I understand that, and of course, this is one segment of the population. I know that there are tons of other segments of the population that feel the same way towards law enforcement, that it's a fear, and I'm not going to come forward if I'm a victim. Like you had said, in terms of like immigration issues, that's another population where they get exploited all the time because they're fearful of coming forward of the consequences when they do. And it needs to change, because I think coming out as the state attorney saying, look, I work with law enforcement, but I do not work for law enforcement. My job is justice. I don't care who's saying what. I'm going to get to the truth, and we're going to hold people responsible. And again, I don't care who they are. And so I think you have to build that trust within the community. I think you need to get out in the community and show that, listen, the state attorney's office isn't a part of law enforcement. We are a separate entity altogether, and we're here for you, for victims of crime, no matter who you are. I don't care if you're illegal. If you're the victim of a crime, I want to get the person who took advantage of you. That is my job, and that's what I care about. If you are addicted to drugs and there was, you were trying to buy drugs and somebody shot you, I don't care that you were trying to buy drugs. I care about that there is another human being out there who's okay with shooting another human being. That guy is dangerous, and I want to get that guy. And so getting people to believe that it's a big task. But in my career, because I have prosecuted 3 police officers personally, I have prosecuted a politician for bribery, and convicted him at trial. I don't care. I don't deal well with corruption. It's not going to work. And as state attorney, I'm going to activate a unit that is designed specifically to hold government officials accountable. It's going to be the government accountability unit. I'm going to put people in there who I know for a fact, share my passion and belief, and we're going to make it so that victims of crimes can contact us directly, because I can't imagine if a police officer is the person who has harmed me, I don't want to go to the police to tell them that. That to me is common sense. So come to us. And same thing with immigration. It does not matter if you are illegal in terms of my prosecution of a case. We are going to get the person who hurt you. And we need to do that. And we need to show them that we're going to do that, because that is the only way that you can reduce crime.
Thank you so much for your thoughtful and lengthy answers. Man, I know our viewers are getting a lot out of it. Do you have time for a couple more questions?
Absolutely, yeah. I can do this all day. I have coffee. Like,
we're at the 40-minute mark, but I have like one more, I guess like policy type question, and then one more kind of get to know you question. So we'll start with the policy one. With Osceola Young Democrats, we created a platform this year, and the environment and the environmental sustainability is on there. And one of the things that you said that really resonated with me at the beginning is you said that part of your job, or if you were elected, part of your job as state attorney would be to uphold their constitutional rights, that those are protected. Mm-hmm. So that said, what kind of environmental justice can the state attorney exhibit or exert on people that are, doing damage to the environment?
So that's not exactly our wheelhouse in terms of, so it's very confusing. The criminal justice system is very confusing in terms of, you have the attorney general. So you have federal laws and federal regulations. You have an entity that's called statewide prosecution, that they handle multiple county crimes. And then you have the state attorney's office, which handles the, basically, the rape, murder, thefts, things along those lines. In terms of applying like this office to those types of things, like if somebody was dumping something in one of our lakes, that really wouldn't come to our office in terms of it being a crime. But there are things that I'm just trying to think of, like on probably a smaller level in terms of environment, like the fish, game, and wildlife. People who do things, who breach those statutes in terms of, hunting, what they do to animals. We do have a animal abuse unit that we would prosecute for that. So I'm sorry, I can't really give you a lot on this because we don't get the bigger types of cases. Now, my personal opinion is that anybody who dumps anything in a lake should go to prison for a really long time. Or anybody who, to me, you're doing a crime against our community, and that's just not acceptable.
Well, we appreciate your time, and I've just got one more question for you, and that is, we are in the Ninth Circuit, which is Orange County and Osceola County, right?
Yes. Yep.
So not to be confused with Congressional District 9.
Correct.
Okay, so in the Ninth Circuit, Osceola, Orange County, prior to social distancing and all of that, where would be some of your favorite places to hang out?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I'm a big movie person. Not so much anymore because now it kind of freaks me out. But but I love the idea, and when the world gets back to normal, doing that. I like being outside a lot, and so I like hanging out by Lake Eola. I like just in general. I enjoy playing tennis and just kind of going for walks and just being in the open air. I think it really helps with stress. It's funny, I was the chief of the sex crimes unit for Orange and Osceola County for a while, and probably half of my unit started to take up running marathons. And so they weren't runners before they got to the unit, and then as you're in the unit and dealing with everything that comes into that unit, I think people just needed it as an outlet. And so I think it's really important to get outside and to walk around. And I love sitting outside and eating lunch and dinner and all of that. So I hope that's not too lame. You guys are probably like, okay, she's lame.
So I'm a Lightning fan. So you held up your Bruins cup, and that was like, I mean, I had to keep myself from eye rolling a little bit, to be honest.
Yeah, so I knew that the coronavirus was a big deal when they canceled the hockey season. It was like, what is happening? Because as you are probably aware, the Bruins are ahead of the Lightning in the standings, and positioned to really win the Stanley Cup this year. So it's going to be interesting to see how, when we get back to normal, or at least some level of normal, what happens with all of that. I'm sorry that you're a Tampa fan. There's always next season.
I think Alicia has a couple more things to say, and we'll wrap it up.
All right, so I do have another question for you, and it kind of resonated with me a little bit. Do you still, when we were talking about coffee and all of that fun stuff, do you still openly break the law, knowing that it's like wrong? And I just want to know the answer to that question.
Sure. Yes. So I cross Orange Avenue, sometimes not at a crosswalk. Yes, I do that, and I'm sorry. And I should be better about that. But there is no crosswalk that is really close. And yeah. Don't tell me you've never crossed the street without heading to the crosswalk.
I actually haven't, but it kind of goes back to what you were saying about privilege.
Sure.
So I just wanted to know if you still do that, knowing that it's kind of morally wrong, knowing that other people could do the same exact thing and they're treated completely different.
No, I think nobody should be treated poorly for doing it, you know, and that's my point, is that you should be able to cross the street. You know, if there is no traffic coming, you should be able to walk across the street, just like he should be able to, just like I should be able to. And that's where it becomes an issue, is we have to make it so that what I feel like I can do, you feel like you can do. And yes, you can choose not to do that. You can choose to walk a couple of blocks and get to a crosswalk and cross over. And yeah, that's fantastic. But to me, when cops make the decision to stop people for things that almost everybody does, and yet they're only choosing to stop Black or brown people because of it. You know, another example is like a bike lights. You know, if people ride a bike in their neighborhood after sunset, you know, you're required to have a light on your bike. I don't know anybody in my neighborhood who's ever been pulled over for that crime or that civil ordinance. But there are people in other neighborhoods who get stopped all the time routinely for that. And that's not right. That's just not fair. You know, people, if you're out riding your bike and it starts to get dark and you're riding home, you should be able to do that with not fear in your heart to do it. So.
Okay, well, thank you for that answer. Just be careful.
Yes.
This is Florida and Florida drivers. Anyways. Yes. So if anyone wants to get a hold of you or your campaign, how do we get in contact with you?
Yeah, so you can email me directly. It's Deborah Barra, so it's DEBORAH Barra BARRA 2020 @gmail.com. And that goes straight to me. And I check my email every night, and I will get back to you if anybody has any questions or comments. I'm happy to continue. As you can tell, I like to talk. I very, very much love the job of a prosecutor, and I enjoy talking about it because it's important and people need to know more about it. And so I welcome the opportunity to discuss it with anyone.
Excellent. And is there anything else you would like our viewers to know about you?
Just that it more so about the race in general. You know, one of the first questions was essentially like, why does it matter? And it matters. This affects everything. It's tied to everything. And we really need people to go out and vote. It's super important. And we're coming up on an election, and it's in August. It's August 18th, and it's an off election. You know, people came out for the primary, for the presidential. They're going to come out in November for the presidential, I hope. And then you have this election kind of tucked in the middle. And my fear is that people stay home. And I know the virus is out there, and it's going to be hard to get people out there. But if we really need that to happen, because it's important, and the decisions that get made in this election will likely affect you more so, honestly, than the presidential, because it will affect your daily life. You know, it will affect something. If something happened to you or your family, it affects you immediately, not years down the road. And that's where we really need to get people motivated. And, you know, we need volunteers, we need people out there, we need people educating everybody else in terms of, here's why it's important. Let's do it. Let's get it done, because nobody is going to get it done for us. And if you really want to make change, you literally have to do it yourself. You have to be out there inspiring other people, because when one person sees that you care and you do it and you're passionate about it, well, then other people, they notice and they think, huh, well, that seems cool. I want to do that. And, you know, just be passionate about it, because it is something that we should be. It's important.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Lee, were you going to say something? I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say I appreciate your time. I know it's the day before Memorial Day, and it's the Eid Mubarak, so Eid Al Fitr for those of us that are for our friends out there that are celebrating the end of Ramadan. And I really appreciate, you know, just your thoughtfulness and candorness with some of your answers.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed being here. In fact, when you guys did the invite, because I get a lot of these, and it was like the coolest invite of probably ever. I was really looking forward to it, because I was like, this is great. I actually just get to sit, talk, and have a cup of coffee. So thank you all very much for it and for this format. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
All right, so that's pretty much it. So we're gonna sign off.